There is a moment in old family paperwork that stops you cold. Between the yellowed birth certificates, the crayon-scrawled school reports, and those faded Polaroids with the white borders curling at the edges, you find it. The deed to your parents' first house. The purchase price is right there in careful, looping handwriting, preserved in the kind of fountain pen ink that's turned a soft sepia brown with age. $23,400. You read it twice, 3 times, your heart catching in your throat. Because it can't be right. Your dad was only 26 years old. He came home every evening from the GM plant with grease still etched deep under his fingernails, the faint smell of motor oil and metal shavings clinging to his work jacket like a second skin. Your mom stayed home with a toddler who was just learning to toddle across the linoleum, giggling as he chased the sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, and she was already carrying the second baby. One income flowing into the household. No framed university degrees on any wall. A young couple barely into their 20s, still figuring out how to be married, how to be parents, how to stretch a paycheck until the next one came. And they bought a house. A 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs. $23,400. 3 bedrooms with wide plank hardwood floors that creaked in all the same familiar spots. The third step from the top of the stairs. The spot by the closet in the master. A backyard big enough for a sturdy metal swing set with the red seats that squeaked in summer, and room left over for the vegetable garden your mom tended every spring. A basement your dad would finish himself over the course of several winters, working down there on Saturday afternoons with the transistor radio tuned to the Tigers game, the smell of fresh-cut lumber and sawdust drifting up the stairs. A long concrete driveway where the big station wagon would eventually sit, accumulating snow through those long Midwest winters, the kind of snow that muffled the whole neighborhood into quiet. Someone who lived through this time remembers their parents buying a similar home in Detroit for $24,000. The monthly mortgage payment was $150. The whole family could eat for a week on $15 for ground beef, potatoes, canned green beans, a loaf of Wonder Bread still warm from the bakery rack. These numbers sit there on paper, quiet and factual, like old postcards from a place you can never quite return to. They don't argue or explain. They simply exist as proof of what once was possible. Your parents signed the papers in early spring, the air still cool enough that you could see your breath. Moved in before the tulips your mom planted along the front walk had even broken through the soil. Within a generation, their kids would be running through those same rooms, tracking mud across the kitchen floor after rainy afternoons, leaving sticky fingerprints on the windows your mom had just cleaned with vinegar and newspaper. The part that's difficult to understand now is how utterly ordinary this felt. Nobody in the family talked about it as an achievement. No celebration dinner at a restaurant, no sense that something remarkable had just happened. Your dad went to work Monday morning, same as always, thermos of black coffee in hand. Your mom unpacked boxes while the baby napped in the portable crib, humming old hymns softly to herself. Life continued with the same gentle rhythm it had before, just in a different location, under a different roof. This was simply what people did. You finished high school, you found steady work, you got married in a small church with paper flowers and punch and plastic cups, you had children, you bought a house. These things followed each other in a sequence that felt as natural as the seasons changing, as predictable as the milkman leaving glass bottles on the porch before dawn. The idea that a young couple on one modest income could own a home carried no surprise in it. The expectation sat so deep in the culture that questioning it would have seemed strange, almost rude. Your dad made maybe $3.10 an hour at the factory, $3.50 if he was in a skilled trade, 40 hours a week. The bank looked at his pay stub, asked a few polite questions, and approved the mortgage. That was the entire process. No endless paperwork, no credit scores, no months of waiting. What's harder to grasp from this distance is why the whole thing worked so smoothly, why the bank didn't hesitate, why nobody seemed to worry about whether they could actually manage it, why the process took weeks instead of years. The real estate agent probably showed them 4 or 5 houses on a Saturday morning, the kind of crisp, hopeful Saturday when the whole world smelled like fresh-cut grass. Nothing fancy. Post-war construction, simple layouts, practical designs built to house the families that were forming all across America in those years. The baby boom generation filling up the new suburbs. Your parents walked through each one slowly. Your mom checking the size of the kitchen cabinets, running her hand along the Formica countertops. Your dad looking at the furnace, tapping the roof beams, squinting up at the attic. They picked the one that felt right, the one where the afternoon light fell just so across the living room. Made an offer that same afternoon. The seller accepted. Papers were drawn up. The bank approved the mortgage without drama. The whole transaction wrapped up in less than a month. Your dad never asked his parents for help with the down payment. The thought probably never crossed his mind. Your mom never considered going back to work just to qualify for the loan. They saved what they could from his weekly paycheck, set it aside in an envelope kept in the kitchen drawer next to the recipe cards, and when they had enough for the deposit, they went looking. Jobs back then carried a permanence that's difficult to describe if you never experienced it. Your dad punched his time card at the start of his shift, did his work, punched out 8 hours later. The job would be there tomorrow, next week, next month, 5 years from now. The factory wasn't going anywhere. The assembly lines kept humming. The work continued in a steady rhythm that everyone could count on. This certainty shaped everything else. When the bank looked at your dad's employment, they saw stability that extended indefinitely into the future. When your parents made their mortgage payment each month, they did so knowing the income would keep coming. Nobody had to say any of this out loud. The permanence was assumed, built into the foundation of how life worked. The house your parents bought reflected the expectations of the time, small by today's standards. The kitchen had one window over the sink and barely enough counter space for meal preparation. The bathroom had tile that was already outdated when they moved in, patterns that had been popular 10 years earlier. The bedrooms were modest, the closets were tiny. Nobody expected a master suite or a walk-in closet or an ensuite bathroom. A house was a house, 4 walls and a roof, rooms where a family could live. Your dad never worried about resale value, never checked what similar houses on the street were selling for, never calculated equity or thought about refinancing or considered the property an investment vehicle. The house existed for one purpose. It was where the family lived, where your mom hung curtains she'd sewn herself from fabric bought at Sears, where your dad planted tomatoes and beans in the backyard every May, the smell of fresh-turned earth filling the air, where the children would grow up, each bedroom holding the sounds of nighttime stories, morning routines, and the soft click of the hall light being turned off. Summer evenings after supper was finished and dishes were washed, your dad would stand in the backyard watering the lawn in his undershirt, the hose making that particular metallic sound when the spray hit the concrete driveway. The air smelled like cut grass and the lilac bush your mom had planted along the fence. Kids from up and down the street played touch football until the lights started to fade and the fireflies came out. Your mom would sit on the front step with a neighbor, talking quietly while keeping half an eye on the children. Nobody locked their doors during the day. Mail got delivered right to the slot in the front door. The milkman still made deliveries in some neighborhoods, leaving glass bottles on the step early in the morning before anyone was awake. People knew their neighbors, borrowed tools back and forth, helped each other with projects. The sense of community wasn't something people worked to build. It simply existed as the natural result of people living in one place, staying in one place, building their lives alongside the same neighbors year after year. The broader world moved at a different pace. Fewer choices demanded attention. Fewer voices competed for your focus. You bought what was available at the local stores. You worked where work was available. You lived where you could afford to live. And for most people, that meant buying a modest house within a reasonable distance of where you worked. The pathway through life felt clear. Almost everyone followed the same general route: finish school, find work, get married, buy a house, raise a family. The sequence varied slightly from person to person, but the broad outline remained consistent. This clarity made decisions simpler. You knew what came next because you could see it in every family around you. Your parents were doing what their parents had done, what their neighbors were doing, what everyone did. Looking back now, what's most striking is how much people didn't notice at the time. The ease of it all seemed normal because it was normal. Your dad never considered himself fortunate to have steady work. That was just employment. Your mom never thought it remarkable that one income could support a family and a mortgage. That was how households worked. The bank approving a mortgage for a young couple in their 20s raised no eyebrows. Of course they approved it. Why wouldn't they? The whole system rested on assumptions so fundamental that nobody thought to examine them. Work was permanent. Families stayed in one place. Communities were stable. Modest expectations were sufficient. A house was shelter and security. Nothing more complicated than that. These ideas formed the bedrock of daily life. Nobody questioned them because there was nothing to question. Across America, the pattern repeated itself in city after city. In New York, young families were buying three-bedroom homes in the suburbs for $24,000 or $25,000. In Chicago, similar houses went for about the same. Out in Los Angeles, you could find a place for $26,000 or $27,000 if you looked in the right neighborhoods. These numbers felt substantial at the time. They represented months of saving, but they remained within reach. When your parents talk about buying that first house, the story comes out plain and simple. No drama in the telling, no years of sacrifice building toward one goal, no impossible choices between security and family. Just what people did. Your dad found steady work, they saved what they could, they bought a house when the time felt right. The whole thing happened the way getting married happened, the way having children happened, one life stage following naturally from the previous one. Someone who remembers those days recalls their mother buying a full cart of groceries for under $15, the kind of cart that would feed a family for a week. Meat and potatoes and canned vegetables and fresh bread from the bakery, everything you needed. And when you find that old deed tucked in with the family papers, when you read that purchase price and try to make sense of it, what you're really seeing is evidence of how different ordinary life used to be. How much was possible with how little? How far steady work could take you? How deeply rooted the assumption was that a young couple could buy a home and raise a family and build something lasting. $23,400. The number sits there in faded ink. It tells the whole story. Not just what a house cost, but what kind of life was within reach. What ordinary people could reasonably hope to build. What normal actually meant. Your parents expected to buy a house because everyone did. And they could buy a house because the world was built in a way that made it possible. That's what those old numbers tell you. Not just prices on paper, but proof of a time when the foundation of an ordinary life was something you could actually reach for and hold. If this nostalgic journey back to 1970 touched your heart, hit that subscribe button so we can keep exploring these beautiful, simpler times together.